Welcome to the Law School Insider, where we have conversations with students, lawyers, and employers.
Succeeding in law school is something that you must prepare for, not only before you begin, but throughout your law school journey, and that's what this podcast is all about. I am your host, Dr. Christopher Lewis, and I will draw from my over 20 years of experience in the college admission field, as well as bring forth the experiences of others as we delve deeper into the issues. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Law School Insider. I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Lewis, and I'm so excited to be able to have you back again this week. This week, I'm really excited to be able to introduce to you Phillip Schaedler of Schaedler, Lacasse, and Frost, PC. He's a partner with that firm. He's been there for a number of years in Adrian, Michigan. And in his journey, he's had a number of experiences, a lot of experiences that have also delved down the road of mediation. And we've never really talked about mediation here on the Law School Insider. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But we also want to talk, as always, about Phillip's journey into what he's doing today. So, Phillip, thanks so much for being on the show this week.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Chris. Thank you for having me.
You know, it is my pleasure to have you as well. It is always great to be able to learn about people's journeys into what they're doing today. This show is all about law school success. So I always like to turn the wheel of time backwards and be able to explore some of that. So I want to do that with you today. I want to take some time and be able to explore the journey that you went on to be able to find the success in your law career. So let's go back in time. What was it about the law that really drew you in, that made you want to become a lawyer?
Wow, you really do want to go back a long ways, don't you? I grew up in a little town in southeastern Michigan, Blissfield, Michigan, and my father had a business right in the downtown central business district of Blissfield. And right across the street from my father's business and our home, which were located on the same property, were two law offices. One, the law office of Jack Riley, and the other office belonged to Aloysius O'Mara. Mr. Riley had been at that location, and his son, Frank, still is. I think they're the third or fourth generation. And Mr. O'Mara came to Blissfield, I think, when I was 5 years old, and his family were very close friends to our family. And these two gentlemen every day walked to work frequently and just sort of became my inspiration. I admired both of them tremendously. They, as children, allowed us to participate, if you will, in their research. Sometimes Mr. O'Mara would have us read to him while he was driving to one location or another, so we would be in the car and reading the law to him in preparation for whatever proceeding he was traveling to. And I was just always fascinated by the profession, or never really aspired to be anything other than an attorney. So I guess you could say that those two gentlemen were my inspiration.
It's always great to have mentors and be able to have the inspiration to be able to push you forward. And I know that everyone that's listening probably has someone in that journey that has helped them along the way. Now, as you decided to attend law school and to be able to push yourself forward into pursuing the law, what was it about the specific law school that you chose that made you choose that? And as you got there, were there any surprises? Was there anything that you weren't expecting that jumped out at you?
Well, my journey through law school was rather interesting. I started out at a law school in San Antonio, Texas, St. Mary's University Law School. That was recommended to me by another friend who had attended his first year of law school there. So I spent my first year of law school in San Antonio. I think probably the most striking aspect of the first year of law school is the difficulty, the rigor of it. I don't suppose that it's any surprise to your audience that the required reading is much more difficult than you've ever expected. I remember the dean of St. Mary's University Law School on our first day there during our orientation remarked to an auditorium full of first years that the engineering students in the audience would be advantaged compared to the rest of us because they knew how to sit down and study. The liberal arts majors among us perhaps didn't have the kind of discipline that the engineering students had, and it became glaringly apparent very quickly that you had better learn how to sit down and get your reading done and develop some discipline in your study habits. So that was probably the most profound lesson that we learned immediately. Having been a liberal arts student and not being terribly disciplined, that was very difficult for me. And I transferred from St. Mary's University to the University of Toledo because of the convenience of it to my home and the economy of it. At that time, Michigan students that lived within, I believe it was 100 miles of the city of Toledo, were allowed to attend as though they were in-state students, so we didn't have to pay out-of-state tuition. So the economy of it was very attractive. I liked the University of Toledo. The facility at that time was almost brand new. I knew several of the faculty members, and so that gave me something of an advantage. I also had some relatives who were on the faculty in the graduate school at the University of Toledo, so that made it attractive to me. And despite my best efforts, I did thrive there.
Well, it's great to hear that you found that niche for yourself. And I know that as you went through law school, you learned things. You said that you had to find that path for yourself, which all law students have to do. Were there certain things that you did to be able to find that path for yourself, find those right study skills for yourself? And did you find that there were specific things that helped you to be successful, not only in the courses, but in the experiences that you were taking part in?
I think lawyers and those who aspire to the law typically are fairly creative thinkers. The difficulty with that is that many times it leads to mischief. We become bored rather easily, and when we become bored, we deviate from the path that we know we should stick to. We challenge that discipline that we try to develop in ourselves. So for me, the way to overcome that was to be as busy as I possibly could, to be so put upon by my academic endeavors that I didn't have time for mischief, which doesn't mean that there wasn't any, only that it was minimized as best I could so that I could concentrate on academic requirements that I was confronted with. Eventually, I found a way by enrolling in graduate school at the same time that I was in law school, which left absolutely no room for activities that weren't lending themselves toward getting something accomplished. And that proved to be very beneficial for me. And it's become sort of a trademark going forward in my career. The busier I am, the more productive I am.
I think a trademark of a lot of lawyers is being busy. And, sometimes it's called the grind. Sometimes it's called many different things. But there is a lot of having to almost chase the dream, I'm going to say, for a lot of lawyers to be able to work with the clients and be able to do the best for the clients. And I think that that's a trademark for a lot of lawyers. So I think that that's great. Now, one thing that I wanted to ask you, as you've gone through your career and you've had a career that has spanned a number of years, as you said, we went back quite a bit in time, and that's okay. But one of the things that I always like to ask is, as you think back to your law school experience and now thinking about the legal practice and the experiences that you've had in the practice of law in the years that you've been practicing it, is there anything that you feel that would have prepared you better for finding success sooner as you entered your career or moved through your career?
Well, we already talked about developing that academic discipline, that ability to study. You talked about the so-called grind of what we call in our practice under-promising and over-delivering. The challenge when you confront that grind is to have fun in doing your work. It's not always fun, but you can always find something fun about it. And the motto of this firm which we took from a prior endeavor of mine, is if you're not having fun, you're not doing it right. So that, I guess, has been the challenge. That has been sometimes helps us overcome the frustration of not achieving the result that we expected or not getting the kind of cooperation from the client or opposing counsel that we would like. It helps us maintain a positive perspective on things when there's sometimes a very high conflict, very contentious issues that have to be confronted. That, as you said, we did go back a long ways. I've been at the practice of law in one, either as a corporate attorney or as a private practitioner for now 34 years. So I've seen a lot of things. I've done a lot of things. Thankfully, people that I have worked for from a very early stage allowed me to do things that in other circumstances or under the tutelage of other individuals I might not have been allowed to do as early or as often. The gentlemen that I worked for believed that they would let you go forward, and when you fell on the seat of your pants, they would be there to pick you up, dust you off, and push you forward again. So that's been a real plus over the course of my career.
Now, I want to transition a little bit because I know you said that there's been some contentious times and some times where you've had to really work hard in your journey as a lawyer. And some of that I know has to do with the movement into doing mediation work that I know that you are doing on a regular basis and you have done over the years. Now, being a mediator is something that lawyers can do, but not all students or even young lawyers know a lot about it. What is the role of a lawyer as a mediator?
The question is, what is the role of a lawyer as a mediator? I think it's probably important for your audience to understand that when I went to law school, there was no formal training in alternative dispute resolution. No one offered courses in how to be a mediator or what mediation was. Nobody offered courses. No law school that I was familiar with at that time offered any courses in arbitration. That was something that your professors talked about or that you read about in your case books, but nobody really knew what it was. So my education in alternative dispute resolution started as part of my career in the healthcare industry. As part of the medical malpractice insurance crisis of the late 70s and early 80s, the state of Michigan implemented a voluntary arbitration program. All patients of all hospitals in the state of Michigan were required to be offered the opportunity to arbitrate any dispute that might arise out of their care or the service provided to them at the hospital. At that time, I was working in-house, and that was my first exposure to alternative dispute resolution. Now, that was arbitration, not mediation. What we now call mediation, we developed in the facilities where I worked as an alternative to arbitration and litigation. We offered what we called care conferences to patients and their families who were dissatisfied with the service that they'd received from us, because that was out of self-preservation. We didn't want people leaving our facility dissatisfied. We didn't want them going out into the public and saying XYZ hospital is a terrible place. I wouldn't take my dog there. We were mistreated there. We wanted our patients and their families to have an opportunity to discuss with us their experience at the facility and how it could be improved, and if they had been injured somehow, what kind of recompense could be made so that they would feel as though they'd been dealt with fairly. Over the course of years, those care conferences became more and more formal, and we began the process of using neutrals to facilitate these care conferences, and that really is what we know today as mediation, the participation of a neutral in the process of problem solving or dispute resolution. So getting back to your primary question, what's the role of an attorney? Today, your students, I know for a fact at Cooley and at Wayne State and at Michigan State, I don't know as much about the University of Michigan programs, but I'm sure that they have them as well, can get formal training in the art of mediation, the responsibility of a neutral in a dispute resolution process. So they are allowed the opportunity to not only learn how to be a neutral, how to assist people in resolving disputes, but how to advocate on behalf of their clients in that setting. So lawyers in mediation have basically two roles. They are informed neutrals, assisting the parties and their attorneys in resolving whatever dispute or conflict that divides them. And they are advocates on behalf of their clients who come to the mediation table equipped with a thorough understanding of their client's perspective, also having discussed with their client the other side's perspective, and having discussed ways that their client can be satisfied with a resolution that doesn't exclude the other side from some sort of benefit. Mediation is the opposite of litigation in the sense that litigation is commonly referred to as a zero-sum game. If many of your audience will be familiar with game theory. So litigation is a zero-sum game. Somebody wins, somebody loses. In mediation, what we strive for is a win-win resolution, where the resolution, albeit not perfect, does give something to both of the participants such that when they walk away from the table, they feel as though they've been heard. They've participated in a process or a resolution that satisfies their needs and their interests. And while they may not be entirely satisfied, at least they don't feel like they lost, so to speak. That's how lawyers can come to the mediation process, both as neutral and as advocate.
Now, I know that you said that there are programs in the state of Michigan, and I know here at Western Michigan University, we do have the Alternative Dispute Resolution Organization, as well as some competitions and things like that. But if a student is looking at programs, what should they be looking for if they have an interest in studying this? Is there specific classes or specific opportunities or experiences that they should be trying to take advantage of while they're going through law school that would prepare them well to be able to do this?
Yeah, absolutely. It's my impression. I know Susan Butterwick runs the mediation training program at Wayne State University. Brian Pappas runs the program at Michigan State University Law School. I know some of the faculty members at Cooley, but I don't know who the coordinator of the program is. But it's my impression that at all of those universities, there are formal classes that provide training as a mediator and training as advocates in mediation. I've been privileged to judge and or coach in some of the competitions that you referred to, both on the state and on the national level. The American Bar Association, I believe, sponsors a competition in advocacy in mediation or alternative dispute resolution, and that's a tremendous program. The quality of the participants and their performance has really been impressive. I've seen students from Case Western, Ohio State, Ohio Northern, Cooley Law School, Wayne State, Michigan State, the University of Toledo, John Marshall, all over the Midwest, the University of Indiana, and the quality of their client representation has been outstanding. I'm certain that some of these people are what I would call naturals to the art of mediation. And they're so well prepared. And this is the kind of training that most of my contemporaries had to come by through some other channel, through participation as litigants rather than as mediators. The kind of mediation that we do now is typically not the shuttle diplomacy of 20 and 30 years ago. The kind of mediation that we do now, the facilitative mediation where a neutral assists the parties to a dispute in a face-to-face conversation about their respective needs and interests and helps them use their imagination and creativity to resolve their differences to their mutual gain and satisfaction is far different from the kind of mediation that I began my career with. So yeah, there's tremendous programs out there. A guy by the name, I think his name is Jack Stahlberg, is the director at the Ohio State University Law School, and he wrote a book called The Middle Voice, which has become a virtual Bible for facilitative mediation. Most of your students will be familiar with a book called Getting to Yes. This kind of literature is the kind of thing that your students can be looking at to prepare themselves to train as dispute resolvers, mediators, if you want.
This is great advice, and I really appreciate you sharing this. Now, if you actually were giving advice to students about their law school journey, if there was one piece of advice that you would give them, what would that be?
The law school that I'm familiar with is so dramatically different from the law school that your students are experiencing. It was competitive in our day. I can only imagine that in this day and age, in this economy, it's incredibly more so. Obviously, the first thing that all of your students should be advised is that they should study hard They should do the best that they can academically. That's in their own best interest, and it will serve them well going forward. I think I've already said that I wasn't the most disciplined student, so that it's probably ironic that I should be giving that sort of advice. Many students that I went to law school with knew from the very beginning what it was that they were going to do once they graduated and passed the bar exam. I think that must be profoundly more difficult now when there are so many alternatives. I wouldn't advise someone to decide right away that the day they enter the law school that they're going to be a litigator or that they're going to be an estate planner or that they're going to be a patent lawyer or that they're going to be this or that they're going to be that. The options and alternatives are so profound and so numerous that my advice to your students would be to, get a feel for the discipline, for the thought process that goes into being a lawyer, and then look around and see what it is that you really want to do. If you want to be in public service, if that's your passion, then pursue that. If you are an engineer or a chemist or what have you, and you want to be in patent law, then certainly pursue that, but don't do so without having looked at some of the other alternatives that are available to you. I guess my advice would be to, once you get the feel of the place, look around and see what your options are.
That's great advice, and I really appreciate you sharing that because I think that it does take time, it does take effort, but you have shown, through your experiences and others that have been on the show have shown that it is possible, and I appreciate you sharing all of this today, and we are going to put some, I don't know if there are any resources or links you want to encourage people to check out if they're interested in mediation.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I check out the Alternative Dispute Resolution section of the State Bar of Michigan. We do have student membership. I would encourage them to join. I would encourage them to be active in it. The Association for Conflict Resolution is also a very active and valuable resource to students who are interested in alternative dispute resolution. The American Bar Association also has an ADR section. I would encourage them to at least explore that, whether they join it or not. All of those things will give you new perspective. It will give you different things and new things to think about if you are at all interested in alternative dispute resolution. What your students should know is that industry increasingly has embraced the notion of alternative dispute resolution. They have examined the cost of litigation, and they have concluded that there has to be a better, cheaper, faster, more private way to resolve their disputes and to preserve their relationships with their suppliers and their customers. And the growth and the frequency of the use of alternative dispute resolution contracts, clauses, I should say, in documents is proof of that. The growth and the frequency of alternative dispute resolutions programs in the law schools, the development of dispute resolution centers in communities throughout this state and other states demonstrates that people are aware of this phenomenon and it's growing and people like it. They get resolution from it in a better, faster, cheaper, more private and confidential way than they do from airing out their dirty laundry in courts of law. So get out there, look around, see what's going on, and I think you'll conclude that this is the wave of the future. Generally speaking, people want to have the opportunity to participate in developing their own solutions rather than having disinterested third parties tell them what they're going to do.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that, and I appreciate you being on the show today. And we will put those links in our notes today. And as always, thank you for sharing your wisdom, but also for sharing your time. And I wish you all the best.
Well, thanks, Chris. I really appreciate it.
Well, that was another great guest this week on the Law School Insider. If you have an interest in being a guest on the show, drop me an email at lawschoolinsider@cooley.edu. And thank you all for listening today. And remember, you have the ability and right to take control of your law school's success. I hope you'll continue listening, creating a plan for success that will prepare you to achieve the dreams that you have set for yourself. Talk to you next time. Thanks for listening. You're on your way to being a law school insider. Please subscribe to stay connected and come back again next time as we speak to more students, lawyers, and employers.